So, Brian, help us understand what the big picture is on this probe into these two aspects of our economy.
Yeah, and the probe is kind of the right way to describe this, because what we're talking about here are not the same authorities that the president used to declare that 10% blanket tariff basically on every country around the world. These are what they call Section 232 tariffs, where the president gives the Commerce Secretary, who in this case is Howard Lutnick, the authority to investigate on the grounds of national security whether or not certain products and exports from other countries into the United States need to be tariffed at a certain rate to protect the United States. So it's actually under the Section 232 tariffs that the United States was able to put in place that 25% tariff on steel and aluminum. And it sounds like he's interested in using the same process to go after the pharmaceutical industry, as well as semiconductors and electronics, which, as over the weekend we were a little bit confused about, did get exempted from the so-called reciprocal tariffs on China at that 125% additional rate. So the problem here is that this process can take a little bit of time. So it might be some weeks before we hear about whether or not the Commerce Secretary does want to follow through on those tariffs. But you can hear the president's intention, and it's likely that his own appointee, Howard Lutnick, will follow through.
And so, Caleb, there's been so many mixed messages on the issue of tariffs, and even within the administration, different opinions or even basic ethos of what it is they're trying to do. How do you read this, and how do investors and how do CEOs looking for the future planning see this?
Yeah, they see a big cloud of uncertainty because they can't make policy, they can't make decisions on inventory, they can't make decisions on hiring, on investing, because they don't know what price they're going to be paying for their imports or what they're going to be taxed on for those exports. So there's a lot of confusion, which is why you see a louder and louder drumbeat around a potential recession, because if they can't see the future, they're just not going to spend. And consumers know inflation is coming. Consumer inflation expectations are as high as they've been since 1981. So we may not be spending either. That's why you hear everybody talking about a recession. Not necessarily the tariffs, but the cloud of confusion over the tariffs, which is causing this big pullback in spending.
So when there's talking about concern of inflation by consumers, but the reality is that at least the last recent slew of numbers show that it's not on the up and up.
Yeah, that's rearview mirror, though, because that was before the 10%. That was before reciprocal tariffs. That was before retaliatory tariffs. So the next inflation numbers will probably be higher unless we get more rollbacks. We've seen a lot of bark here, less bite, as the administration has rolled back a lot of these tariffs. Now, on automobiles, he's willing to negotiate. We saw the rollback on smartphones and tablets over the weekend. This is kind of where they started, now pulling back a little bit, giving a little bit more clarity.
So, Steve, you're in the Port of Los Angeles in San Pedro, one of the busiest areas in the world. What are you hearing about the tariffs, and what's the movement been like?
Yeah, Jose, I've spoken to union leaders, I've spoken to port CEOs, I've spoken to longshoremen, I've spoken to small business owners. I have to say, the overwhelming sense and feeling here is one of uncertainty and fear. About 40% of all the goods in the U.S. comes through these two ports that are right next to each other here in Southern California. About half of the total business, imports and exports, is business done with China. So if these tariffs stay in place, you're talking about anywhere from a 10 to 20%. These are projections from both the ports, reduction of cargo loss. That means reduction of hours for workers. It means reduction of business. It means likely a reduction of jobs. I spoke to the port liaison of one of the biggest unions, the Longshoremen Union, here in Southern California, about 15,000 members strong. Here's what he said about the sense of fear that everybody's feeling in this area. Listen to this.
40% of the nation's cargo comes through the ports of LA and Long Beach. And so we are the economic engine for not just this region, but for the whole country. And we're concerned because the cargo levels that we've seen coming through recently in anticipation of the tariffs has been extraordinarily high. And we're concerned that if the tariffs take hold in some form or fashion, that it could lead to the opposite and have very low cargo flow, which would impact jobs.
Meanwhile, it is another busy day here at the Port of Los Angeles. A lot of these businesses got wind, of course, that the tariffs are going to be in place, so they're trying to upfront their goods, push them through before the tariffs take effect. So we're already seeing about a 26% bump from this time last year, about 2.5 million of those huge containers coming through these ports so far this year. But that's all in anticipation of the tap running entirely dry. Jose?
Steve Patterson, thank you so very much, my friends. So, Caleb, take a listen to what the president said yesterday about a possible reprieve on these Apple products that you were talking about, and cell phones and other things.
What about any Apple products, other cell phones?
Look, I'm a very flexible person. I don't change my mind, but I'm flexible. and you have to be. You just can't have a wall and you'll only go. No, sometimes you have to go around it, under it, or above it. There'll be maybe things coming up. I speak to Tim Cook. I helped Tim Cook recently, and that whole business. I don't want to hurt anybody.
How do you process that?
Yeah, proximity to power. Look at the inauguration seating chart, and you saw some of the biggest CEOs of tech companies sitting behind the president's family there. And he knows, the president and his administration, how important Apple is, not just as a consumer products company, but as a stock. This is one of the most widely held stocks by investors, retail investors in the world, and that stock has been punished dearly over the last few months. So maybe this is a way to put some wind back in the sails.
That stock has been punished dearly over the last couple of months, but most stocks have been punished dearly over the past 2 weeks.
Yep. Yeah, there have been a little bit of a comeback as we've seen this leaking of news of maybe we'll hold back on the smartphones and the laptops. And I think this is a little bit of a carrot for those tech leaders and for those tech companies. It's not just because we need to keep spending on their products to keep up in economic growth. Again, these are the most widely held stocks in the world, and especially by retail investors like us.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, I mean, the R&D that they have to go forward on and the investments that they have to make are very much related to what they're going to be able to bring in if the majority of their products are made overseas. Hey, Brent, is there any communication that we know of between the Trump administration and the Chinese regime on this?
At the highest level, not that we're aware of. But I do think that this trade war with China is kind of entering a stage that's going to look very similar to the negotiations under the Trump administration's first term. You'll recall at that time in 2018, 2019, it was really a trade conversation that was singularly zoned in bilaterally with the United States and China. And all the attention was on the meetings down in Washington. I remember all the cameras being set up down on 17th Street to see whether or not Robert Lighthizer was going to, step out and shake hands with the Chinese ministers that were here to negotiate. And there were, by the way, a number of dignitaries that went over to China as well. So as this trade war kind of zones in on China, despite the fact that we have to remember a 10% tariff on every other country around the world is substantial as well. But as we talk specifically about China, I think the focus is going to be very much in the coming weeks and months over what types of meetings, how high level are those meetings between the United States and China.
Just taking advantage of the fact that both of you guys are so knowledgeable about so many issues. Caleb, just the thoughts on, Secretary Bessent is in Argentina. He met with the President Milei yesterday. There's some agreement there. But when you look at how Latin America has been so directly affected by their trade with the United States, CAFTA and NAFTA, then USMCA, it seems as though on that front, Mexico alone, there is so much uncertainty as to what the American position is vis-a-vis our neighbors.
Absolutely. And don't forget, we get a lot of imports of soy and corn from Argentina. But guess where they've been selling a lot of that? To China, to Africa, and other countries. So keeping them sort of within the United States' good graces so they become a valuable trading partner for us could be a very smart move by the Treasury Secretary, because they're doing business with other countries around the world. A lot of other countries are just not doing business with the United States anymore. That could be a big problem.